Hey, what's up YouTube? It's me, George, with No Copay Education, and in this video I was wanting to discuss and review the Next Step MCAT practice tests 1 through 10. So to provide a little bit of background information, I took quite a few of these tests. I think I took 8, and I thought they were really instrumental in helping me prepare for the MCAT, so I wanted to do a video about them. To begin, let's talk about the pros. So the first is the quality of the passages is really high. They give you primary scientific literature with very confusing charts and confusing experiments where you have to understand the design of the experiment, and then you have to be able to interpret the data of the experiment with the information that you know in order to get the right answer. So I thought that was really representative of what I saw on the actual MCAT. So the chemistry and physics and the biology, biochemistry were very high quality. The second thing that I really liked was the explanation of the passages. They give very good explanations of all of the questions. So they tell you not only why the right answer is right to the question, but they also tell you why the wrong answers are wrong, which the difference might seem a little bit minute, but a key thing about doing well on the MCAT for a lot of people, including myself, was process of elimination. So I found it really helpful that they gave very thorough explanation of all of the answers and why 3 of the answers are wrong and 1 of the answers is right. The other thing that I really liked about the Next Step MCAT test was the format of them. The Next Step tests were the only third-party tests that I personally took, which this might have changed, but I think so I took the Next Step tests around April or May of 2018, and, the hotkeys were right, like Alt-H was highlight, I think Alt-S was strike through, all of that was the same, and the screen was white and blue and black, just like the actual test. So I thought that was really, really good on Next Step's part. There's actually a phenomena that you'll probably have to know if you're studying for it, called context-specific learning. Making the practice tests look identical to what you're going to see on test day is really helpful, and there's a lot of evidence to prove that. The other stuff about Next Step that I like was that they give you a lot of data and feedback on the questions you're missing. So you can sort of focus your selective attention on what you're missing instead of what you're getting right all the time. And they actually do a really good job of dividing their Q banks and practice questions into these topics that you're weak in. So you can really work on your weaknesses, which is a really good use of your time because on the MCAT you can't go over everything. You just try your best to go over what you can go over. There's so much content. It actually, I'd say for most people taking it, be incredibly difficult to go through it all. So that's why it's a good idea to focus on what you're weak at as your test date approaches. And I also like that they give you a free practice test. It's not cheap to take the MCAT. It's always a few $100s, and if you have to retake it or push your test date back, that's even more money. So the fact that they give you a free practice test is really nice. So there's really no excuse not to at least take that one. There were a few cons that I thought about the test. The first was I thought the cars section was really off. Like, I'd say this is the number one problem I had with the test. So critical analysis and reasoning skills usually requires you to understand the argument, the tone, being able to distinguish the main idea from the evidence. And I thought that the Next Step cars questions were actually more of what happened in the passage versus what was the passage arguing, what inferences can you make, those kinds of questions. And it was really frustrating because, it's really hard to remember all those facts, and I was missing like a bunch of questions, and I'm like, crap, my entire car strategy is off. But in actuality, I thought the cars questions were really low quality. The second con was, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad use of your time, but I thought the psychology, sociology part was harder than the actual MCAT. The psych-soc questions, at least from what I saw when I took the MCAT and the AAMC practice material, which is publicly available, I thought the psych-soc section was a lot more straightforward than what they give you on the next step problems. But that isn't to say that you won't see some of those problems. It's just that a majority of next step is the very, very challenging graphs, charts, tables that give you a headache just even trying to, like, sort of like logic games level where you're playing alphabet soup. And whenever I was taking the actual MCAT, I thought the passages were a lot more straightforward than that. But there were a few questions. So I guess in a way, Next Step prepared me for the few like very, very hard questions. But it was kind of demoralizing because I would be missing all these psych-soc problems that really probably weren't going to make a majority of my test. But on the other hand, that might be good because you might be more willing to work harder on psych-soc than you would be if you were getting most of the questions right. And the final con was that scores were a little deflated for me in sections, mainly psychology and sociology. My actual score was much higher than any of my practice tests from Next Step. So that was a little discouraging, but I think that's a problem with all the third parties. The scoring is very, very difficult to get right. Overall, I thought they were very, very good practice tests. I'd give them 4 out of 5 stars. They were better, in my opinion. When I say better, I mean closer to the actual thing than the Princeton Review, Kaplan, and Exam Cracker tests that I took. And I thought they were a little bit worse than Altius. So that's it for my thoughts about the Next Step test prep MCAT practice tests. If you have any questions, comments, or concern, feel free to email us at nocopaytutorials@gmail.com.